Hello and welcome to another Superversive Sunday live stream. I am your host, Ben Wheeler, and I'm here today with Megan Fox, author of Believe Women, the Me Too movement The Death of Due Process from Salome to Me Too. Always with always get me with the colon side things. I don't know what to call it. I did it for my own books too. Anyway, Megan, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Ben.
Fantastic. I'm glad to have you. So, you recently, through Superversive Press, the best publisher of science fiction and fantasy and all that good stuff, you published this book, link down below, uh, which is, let's see here. How about you describe it in your own words, what this book is?
Sure. Believe Evidence, The Death of Due Process from Salome to #MeToo, is basically a compilation of several real-life stories of women who have lied and done terrible things to destroy men in their lives. And the reason why this book had to be written was because, the women's movement, the Me Too movement, wanted everyone to believe women, believe women all the time, no matter what. And the truth is that we cannot believe women. We must believe evidence, or innocent people will hang. It's been shown time and time again throughout history and literature that women do lie, and they can be vindictive and malicious in order to destroy men. It has happened over and over again through the course of history. And in my book, I take you on a little journey through history and literature in the first part of the book. And I talk about we call them the hysterical harpies of history and literature, who did terrible things to ruin the lives of men that they encountered. And some of those include, all right, I can show you guys some of the artwork, which I think is really good. This is my hysterical harpies part. Can you see that?
Yeah. Very nice.
Some of the women in the first part of the book would be like Potiphar's wife, who accuses Joseph of the same Joseph of the many-colored coat, accuses Joseph of rape. And she even fabricates evidence. She takes his cloak while he's spurning her advances, and then she tells everyone that he raped her, and she has this piece of evidence, his torn cloak, so he goes to prison for a very long time. Then there's Athaliah. Athaliah was a queen of Israel who killed her grandchildren, all of them, so she could retain the power to the throne. And in literature, we see Lady Macbeth in Shakespeare, another treacherous woman who leads her husband to commit a crime and kill the king. And she does that through manipulation. And so it's not just a collection of stories of women who've done bad things, although there is that. But it also is, that's the first part of the historical context. And then the second part goes into the more modern versions of these types of women and what they have done to frame men. And of course, now it's used as a political weapon. So any man who is a political opponent of mostly Democrats, let's be honest, if it's a Republican man, it's open season on his reputation. Gloria Allred will pull women out from under rocks to accuse the Republican candidate of anything from, he tried to kiss me once and I didn't want him to rape trains, like we saw in the Brett Kavanaugh affair.
Yes, I remember.
And that is one of the things that started me thinking about this book, was the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings was a last straw. I couldn't sit there and take it anymore. I couldn't, as a mother, as a wife, I have a son, I have a husband, I have a father. I couldn't sit there and watch these women do this to this man, who by all accounts, in 7 investigations by the FBI, was said to be a good man, a righteous man. 200 women signed a letter saying that he had been nothing but wonderful to them when they worked with him. I just didn't believe it. And then these women were being discredited left and right. Christine Blasey Ford was not a credible witness. She was the opposite of a credible witness. She had no corroborating evidence. Even her own witness said it didn't happen. We were never there. I never met Brett Kavanaugh. And yet the media did this thing that they do where they just report these allegations as true. And so it just to me, I just had enough. That's it. That something needs to be done. I'm going to write about this because due process, the presumption of innocence is being destroyed. And I would have stood behind Christine Blasey Ford if she had decided to go to the police and file a complaint and take Brett Kavanaugh to court. I believe that we should fight these things out in court and not in the press, where people just use their own opinions to, destroy a man's reputation. So that's basically where the idea for the book came, and what I was thinking when I started writing it. And so it's had some good feedback. People are happy that it's out. I've heard people say, "Geez, there's nothing like this," and it's true. There isn't.
It's always these sort of resources for the modern world. There's a meme going around from Dave Chappelle, the Dave Chappelle show, and he goes, "Modern problems require modern solutions." And of course, the joke is that it's like when the anti-vaxxer kid is bullying you and you sneeze on him. Modern problems require modern solutions. And a lot of these things, you need to stay protected. You need to stay, aware of what you are. I've read this book. Sorry, I haven't read this book. It's on my list of things to read. But I can already tell it's like, if you have to be alone with women, or if you decide that you want to be a Republican, you better start taking some Mike Pence levels, protections going forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, didn't he come off as being the smartest guy in the room, right?
Right.
There was this whole thing that happened right before the Me Too movement blew up, and it was that I remember this, the ladies on The View were making fun of Mike Pence because it had come to light that he refused to be in the same room alone with a woman who wasn't his wife. And, until the Me Too movement and the Harvey Weinstein and all this stuff broke, I think that there was a lot of people who looked at evangelical people who did things like that as like they were very prudish and uptight and, oh, that's not necessary. Well, after the Me Too movement, guess who wasn't caught with his pants around his ankles? Mike Pence.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you bring that up too, because I do address that in this book. It's not just look at these bad women, but at part 3, I give real world advice on how to protect your sons and how to keep your daughters from becoming the types of women who will lie about a man and fabricate these stories. And so, and also how to keep your girls from becoming real victims of rape. And so there's some actual real life, useful stuff in here too. And I've had some really good feedback on that. People have said they really enjoyed that part very much. But yeah, Mike Pence, he's got it completely right. In this day and age, with the type of feminism that has destroyed natural relationships between men and women, men now have to go to extreme lengths to keep themselves safe. And in one of the things I would recommend, and this used to be a joke several years ago, that, if you're sending your son off to college, not only should he go with all of his books and whatever, but send him with a handful of consent forms. And these days, consent forms are probably not even enough. He's going to have to get videotaped evidence before the act and after the act, with the woman saying, I consented to this, I enjoyed it, these are what we did, he didn't do anything wrong. And actually, that might not even be enough. You might even have to record the actual deed at this point. And
Family Guy made a joke about that last week. Quagmire pulls out this consent form. He's like, sign here, initial here. It's like, what's this? Oh, just a consent form. And now we're ready to do it. Giggity, giggity. And it's like,
yeah, you have to. I don't know how as a man in that situation, especially on campus where they have criminalized regret sex. I'm going to call it regret sex because it's not rape if you just regret it afterwards. Do you know what I mean? So some of these women on campus, they're being told that if you wake up and you regret getting drunk and getting into bed with someone, you can call it rape. And
Yep.
the campus will back you up. Listen, ladies, if you make a bad choice and you regret it in the morning, you don't get to call it rape. You don't get to accuse someone of rape. No, no, no. That's nuts. And so, because of those situations, I don't know how, as a man, you get through college with any relationship with any of these girls without consent forms and video evidence that you didn't do anything wrong.
It's a very difficult situation for men, and it hurts the women who aren't of that character. Just because it's like I could be doing this, but it's risky, and Tinder is annoying, and porn's free, and all these other things going around, and it's like, why bother?
It
Better.
is sad, but that's why men are choosing. That's why young men are choosing porn over real relationships, and you really can't blame them for that when this is the type of environment they're being subjected to.
I do want to real quick say that porn isn't a good solution for men. It does horrible things to your testosterone, to your body, and all that jazz.
Oh
But
yeah, it's not a good solution. But
it's
of
not a
course,
good
we see
solution.
but there, I see the reasoning behind it. I understand why they're retracting into these things, into these solitary, self-soothing activities, because the outside world has become very, very dangerous for men, for single men. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, porn is proven to even cause erectile dysfunction, online porn especially. And so that's a very troubling thing. That's troubling for men. And also ruins the ability to have normal relationships with women and be able to approach girls and talk to them. But so do feminists, by the way. They ruin that. They
Uh,
ruin
there's a good joke going around of, you know how a frog's poisonous. It's the same way with the feminists if they've got the pink and blue hair.
That's in
You know,
here. That's in
yes,
here. Yeah,
beautiful. Great
it's
minds
in here.
think alike.
It's actually, there's a word for it, and I'm gonna totally screw it up and see. It's called there's a word for it,
Apotheosis.
apodosomatism or something. I,
Oh,
I I need to look it up. I've written it in the book, but pronouncing it is very, very difficult. But it's an actual scientific term for what it means when a frog or an animal has a loud color pattern that shows you that it's poisonous. And
huh.
I have that in the chapter called How to Harpy Proof Your Son. And it's about avoiding the types of women who are likely to do this to you. And in what now, first of all, just so you know, we're not against all women who have rainbow colored hair. However, if a woman has rainbow colored hair and several other red flags, like another red flag to go
Mhm.
along with the red hair, like or the crazy crayon colored hair, like for instance, if they protest a lot, if they go to these pussy hat protests, or if they want to talk about patriarchy, or how white people are bad, if they have the purple hair plus one of these other things, then you really need to be worried. The purple hair might not be enough to gauge that decision, but it certainly is an indicator. And when combined with other things, other warning symbols, stay far, far away.
Well, for men, I don't know how long you've been around, like the nanosphere or something like that, back when that was a thing a few years ago. But like there was a whole list of things that if it's like, rainbow hair and tattoos, you probably want to stay away.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's a whole big thing. I don't want to get stuck on this one thing, but like as men, it's like if you're not thinking with your lower regions, we can see the signs, we can avoid the signs, and then find somebody of value to have a relationship with rather than you know rolling the dice. It's like did you say Harvey proof your
Harp
sons?
harpy proof.
Harvey proof. Okay, because I was thinking of like if you want to get out there, and have all the sexual relationships you want with women. Just become a Hollywood executive, just become a Harvey Weinstein, just do that. Trade your power for sexual favors.
Yeah,
And,
that's the other thing too, is that the Me Too movement really confuses me because it seemed like there was going to be some legitimate complaints and some legitimate, takedowns of bad dudes. And Harvey Weinstein certainly seemed like a bad dude. But
mhm,
as it got going and as we started to hear these stories, it really seemed, even in Harvey Weinstein's case, in a lot of them, not all, some women said he raped them, but most of the women who were coming up, forward basically admitted to trading their body for monetary, or what's the word? Trading to get up in their career.
yeah.
Um, and if that's the case, and you made that decision, well, you're an adult. You made a decision to trade this thing you have for something you wanted. Um, Now, it might not have been the best decision, but you could have said no. You could have gone and waited tables or gotten a
You
different
want to
job.
be a star, don't you?
Yeah, see, that to me, I think there's a big responsibility there that falls on the women. Because are we really under the impression that men in Hollywood don't have to do the same thing?
Oh,
I mean,
they almost certainly do. I
oh, they
know that.
absolutely have to do. They absolutely have to do the same thing.
I know
Um,
Will Smith tried to do something. I can't remember what it was, but he was on Twitter. He was talking about sexual abuse and stuff like that. All of a sudden, this nobody shows up in his posts and goes, "I have videotapes of you doing X with Mister and then something." It wasn't a name anyone recognized. It was a fake name. If you don't want those out there, you'll shut up. And he just stopped posting. Like nobody knows where this Twitter account came from. I don't know how real it was or whatever, but it's like, you see the images, you see him, going on about family and stuff like that. Then all of a sudden it's just nothing. And I haven't heard him do really anything except
I
his
wouldn't put it
Twitter.
past them. Hollywood's a really sick place, and they have a very different set of morality than the rest of us. And I don't think it's any different for men than it is for the women in Hollywood. And I think if you go into it, at some point you make a choice. Am I going to do this? Am I going to trade my dignity for a career? And if the answer is yes, then I don't really want to hear about it 20 years later that you're mad about it, because you
Mm.
could have said no. Now, for the women who are claiming that they were raped, he's on trial for that, so we'll find out. And if he did that, he should go to prison. Um,
And I don't know about the whole rave thing, but we do know for sure that he is exactly the sort of man to demand sexual favors.
oh,
He is like, I think I was reading an article from somebody, and he basically said that like the Me Too movement basically threw Harvey Weinstein under the bus to try and head off the mass at the pass, so they don't lose basically everyone important to them. And we're not even talking about the real criminals here. For every Harvey Weinstein, there's a couple of politicians running around, Bill Clinton and whatnot, who are almost certainly as evil
oh,
or worse.
certainly. And of course, the Me Too movement doesn't want to talk about Bill Clinton's victims, and they don't want to give any credence to Paula Jones or Kathleen Willey or Juanita Broderick. Nobody wants to hear their stories, and we're just told. Some in the media came forward afterwards and said, "Well, we feel bad about that. We should have done more." Well, then why aren't they doing it now?
Hmm.
It's not too late. These women are still alive.
Yep.
Um, but no, they don't want that. It's really very politicized. It's about taking down Republicans. It's taking down political enemies of the left. The left really does not care about sexual abuse. That's very, very clear, because the left owns Hollywood and they have been cheering and cheerleading for sexual abuse forever. Um, how about Corey Feldman? No one will listen to him talk about how everyone knows children are abused in Hollywood, and no one will talk about it. I don't see the Me Too movement, you know, calling for children to come forward who have been abused by these producers and directors, and there's a video out there. There's a documentary everybody should watch called An Open Secret, and with actual convicted pedophiles in Hollywood who, the victims came forward and talked about it, and no one is talking about it. It's just about these starlets who traded their goods for an Oscar, and we're supposed to feel very bad for them, but no one's talking about the real problem. The real
Right.
problem is the real crimes that are happening are not happening between consenting adults. It's happening between children and producers. And I just think it's terrible. I think it's terrible that we're concentrating on these women who may or may not have been abused. I don't know. And his trial will shake that out. And that's the thing that we need to concentrate on is we cannot try someone in the press. We cannot destroy a person's reputation because of rumors and hearsay. We must rely on evidence. They must be innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And Harvey Weinstein's going to face a jury. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yep. And it's all about that evidence. There's a certain amount of point where you have to say, yes, absolutely, I could believe this happened. You can make choices that whether or not you want to associate with these people, and we're humble people. We'll never, rub shoulders with Harvey Weinstein or his ilk and all that jazz.
Right.
But it's still one of those things. Hey, this is the X company. They want to turn your book into a movie, and Bryan Singer's going to produce it.
Oh God, no.
Oh
no.
no.
Yeah, you're right. That's one of those things that all good people should stand up and say, no, Bryan Singer won't touch anything that I've made,
Right.
because no, the people who've come to, accuse him are very credible and
Oh yes.
very credible. And, still, it's terrible to me. And in the cases of of children who have been abused, it's true that children notoriously do not come forward. What bothers me is when grown women claim to have been assaulted when they were, teenagers or adults, and they don't come forward for 30 years. I don't understand this. As a mother, and this is in the book too, as a mother of daughters, I talk to them very seriously about what their responsibility is in any kind of attack or assault. And their responsibility is to fight like hell, to try to get away. If you can't get away, get as much DNA under your fingernails as you can, and then go directly, do not shower, do not change, do not wash your hands, go directly to a hospital, call the police and call me. And that's that. That anybody thinks that it's somehow okay, or they're too scared to come forward, or their attacker won't be brought to justice. Well, it certainly isn't going to happen 30 years after the crime, when all evidence is gone, when all physical evidence is destroyed. So there is a responsibility that women have in being attacked, and they need to know that they need to come forward immediately. And the longer they wait, the less chance they have of getting justice. And also, the more chance you have that people won't believe you. In Christine Blasey Ford's case, she had the actual allegation was like that he tugged on her bathing suit. That's literally the allegation, that she was at a party, they were drinking, and somebody held her down, and he may have pulled on her bathing suit. Like that's the allegation. How do you prove that? That's unless you went forward at the time and complained to a teacher or a parent or the police or something. There's no way to prove that. And so it should never have even been brought up in his case for his confirmation ever.
Yep. No video evidence, no proof, nothing. And he wasn't even tried in a proper trial. They sent out one agent to sift through everything, whatever her name was saying, and it came out lacking. I'm pretty sure the only reason she allowed it to go on is that she was told to just listen to everything and then make your choice.
Yeah, it was a real circus. As Senator John Kennedy, who was a Republican, said, it was an intergalactic freak show, and the people involved ought to hide their head in a bag forever. That was my favorite quote of the whole thing, was that Kennedy says that you should hide your head in a bag. or how about when Lindsey Graham looked at the press and said, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to see if he floats? Let's throw him in the water and see if he floats.
Right.
It became a Monty Python sketch. The entire thing was, he's a witch, burn him.
Yes,
Well, how
yes.
do you know he's a witch? Well, he's got a wart, I don't know. I mean, so I also talk about the Salem witch trials in the book, which was a shameful time in our history, a shameful miscarriage of justice, where more than 14 or so people were murdered, were hung or burned because of witchcraft, supposed witchcraft, which was based on the lies of girls, by the way, young girls.
Yep.
Who were hysterically, would have, I don't know if you remember in grade school being assigned The Crucible, but it's a wonderful play by Arthur Miller. And that play was based on true events, but, he took some liberties. And I talk about the play because it's the most familiar thing that most people have read. And so much of it is so well written. And I like to say, that is a cautionary tale. It's not a blueprint. It's not. The
Right.
Crucible is a cautionary tale. It is not telling you this is the way we should go and do and revamp our justice system based on the word of a bunch of crazy children. And when you saw those women out in front of the Supreme Court tearing at the doors, the scratching, the screaming, and some of them were bleeding on themselves. And I mean, it was some really sick, weird stuff.
Oh, yes.
How do you not look at that and see Abigail Williams throwing herself on a courtroom floor and screaming at ghosts on the ceiling? It's very hard for me to understand how half of this country didn't see this for what it was, didn't see it for the cheap political theater that it was, and that women, of all people, women should never be believed first. I'm sorry. I'm a woman. I've had dealings with women my whole life. Not to say that all women are bad and awful and manipulative, but a lot of them are. Like a lot of them are. I've been on committees with women before. I mean, they can be nasty. I'm telling you.
Right. It's one of those things. I'm looking for jobs every time I go in there, and I've only ever been interviewed once by a man in my most recent search, and every time it's like they look at me, then their eyes fall, and it's like, I've already lost the job, haven't I? Yeah, well, let's do this anyway. Rolled up sleeve, Um, it's just a problem of culture, I think, as much as it is like as in the lack of spirituality, the lack of truth, the lack of spine of people willing to do what's needed to be done. That sort of pushes us into it. So then we get memes like Susan from the parish council, who thinks that priests can be women too, or something like that.
Oh, God,
In general, everyone's so confused. No one knows what the rules are. And it'll just keep going forever and ever until it either.
well, and this is actually you hit on something. Whenever women get involved and put into positions of power, it seems that things all go to hell. I mean, like you were mentioning the church, and it's true. As soon as women are given the roles in these churches, when they open it up for women to be priests or women to be, leaders of the church, suddenly that church goes right down the LGBTQ road. And it's because it starts with the women every time. Every time it starts with the women. I think there was a reason that St. Paul warned against women being teachers in the church. And it isn't because women are stupid or women are this or that. It's because the natural order of things is for men to be leaders and of their society, of their families, of the church.
Yep.
And when that natural order, and it isn't because God's a sexist, it's just the way the natural law works. when that is upended, you have natural consequences. And I think we see that. I know it's controversial for me to say this. I'm sure someone will find it and be like, "Oh my God." But I've
Oh, I
noticed
know.
it. You can see it happen in front of you. You can see it happening, every
Yeah.
time women are put in charge of these institutions, they go straight to the left and straight downhill.
There, like, in case somebody wants to bring up certain exceptions of female rulers who have ruled their country well, or whatever, many of those women had powerful, very motivated, and loyal men uh, to help them along, and sort of take care of things. Elizabeth had her many sort of knights. So did Victoria. If you want to have a counterexample, China's Zhu Weitan, who basically had did whatever she wanted, or Queen Atalaya, whatever her name was, of Israel. I always thought it was Atalia or something like that. But
Oh, I've always thought it was a Athalia, but I could be wrong. It could be Atalaya. It could be.
But both those women did not have that. The countries went to pot, and they murdered as many people as they ever thought was a threat to them. As
Right.
opposed to, like Elizabeth had some murders, but those were like legitimate rivals to the throne, not some dude who looked at her daughter funny. Or the babies of the grandchildren of
Right. They're her
the
own
of
grandchildren. Just
right.
incredible.
She was
Jezebel is another one.
she was
Jezebel's a great
Jezebel's
one to talk about.
daughter. She was Jezebel's daughter. Just so you, in case. Oh well.
And that doesn't surprise me because Jezebel was probably the most wicked, murderous in the Bible. And Jezebel, it's funny because the SJWs, the feminists, they just love Jezebel. They love them some Jezebel, but of course they have no historical context. They don't realize that they're elevating Jezebel, this murderess, to a position in their lives of being someone to look up to. She was a murderer, a blasphemer. She fabricated evidence against Naboth so she could take his vineyard and have him murdered for it. But not only that, she killed the prophets of God. She killed hundreds of them, and was constantly after Elijah for making her prophets look stupid, her prophets of Baal. And she was so feared that Elijah, the man who could bring fire down from the sky, like Elijah, the Elijah, was terrified of Jezebel. Terrified. He was on the run, hiding in caves just to avoid her wrath. So this was a woman who had no redeeming qualities. And she actually meets one of the greatest ends ever, being thrown out of a window and eaten by dogs during dinner. It's just a great story of justice, which we don't see very much anymore. That it feels like we live in a time now where there is no justice. And in fact, in the later part of the book, in the modern age, we talk about the lying wretches of the modern age. I keep saying we. I'm using the royal we. I guess it's me. I wrote this book. I keep saying we did this. I didn't. But in the second part, in the modern part, I talk about how there is no justice for these women who bring these false accusations. I wish they got eaten by dogs. I wish something would occur to give them some prison time or something. But in most cases, when women lie about rape today, even if their victim, the man, goes to prison for years and years and loses his whole life, there's no justice. There is no punishment. So it's like, why not? Why not take the chance? Why not roll the dice? Why not go after this man for rape when nothing will happen to me?
Yep. I mean, it's one of those things where eventually, of course, well, we should be very clear. There is a cost. There will be consequences, either in this life or the next.
Sure.
Whenever that happens, and as Christians, I don't particularly know your belief system, but
I'm a Catholic. I believe
okay,
that. I believe
okay.
that there will be consequences. Yes. I guess, but as
But
human
we
beings,
Well,
we seek justice. We need justice, and
yes.
in these cases, there is none. Not now.
No, but it's that I was going to say, as Christians, like I don't want anyone to fall to perdition. But at the same time, if it's like if it's one of those things, I've broken not my vows, but like I've broken my morality for saying I brought someone in there, and she's like, yeah, if you don't start paying me, I'm going to accuse you of XXX. It's like, so are the consequences of me attempting to hide a murder worse than what she's planning to do to me now if I don't pay the hush money? There's a joke in China that it's cheaper if you run somebody down. It's cheaper to run them over again than it is to pay their disability, which they will, of course, try to loot you for everything they got. And of course, it is better to say that I would not sin at all. But being human, we sin. It's one of those
Right.
things. It's like, you're already halfway down the rabbit hole there, friendo. How far do you want this to go? And
Yeah.
it's like, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth anything that's going on. There's a thunderstorm outside, in case you can't
Oh, I
even.
hear that. Wow, that was really loud thunder.
Oh yeah, and it's like all men are under threat, except for, of course, Mike Pence, and they
Right.
need the
Mike Pence
safety.
is still he's sitting pretty, isn't he? I mean,
Yeah,
he's got the right idea, and it's really sad because frankly, it has destroyed regular relationships between boys and girls and men and women. And so now when your teenagers are dating, you're going to have to be so much more careful, and especially if you have a son, I would never encourage anyone to let their son go out with any girl without witnesses, without a chaperone or a double date. Or, I would not encourage, I'm not going to encourage my son to be alone with a girl um, who God knows what she could accuse him of. Sarah Hoyt, who I'm sure she writes with me at PJ Media, also she's a famous author in her own right. She wrote this article on PJ Media about her son and the problems that he had with girls at school. And the article, I don't have it off the top of my head, I quoted in the book. These girls had lied to the school. They had lied to the authorities at school, saying that her son was chasing them home from school and throwing rocks at them. So Sarah started to go and sit outside the school and wait for him and pick him up instead of letting him walk home or however he was getting there. And on one day, she saw him come out of the school, followed by at least 8, she said, of these girls. There were like 8 of them, following him, throwing rocks at him and calling him terrible names.
yeah,
And this was all over the fact that they decided that because he had some either social anxieties or he was a little different, that he was, in their words, retarded, and they wanted him out of their school. And so these are the types of things that girls and women can do. And it's very important for parents to recognize that girls have this mean streak. And they have it's not the phrase mean girls doesn't exist for nothing. There is such a thing as mean girls, and it can be any girl. Any girl is susceptible to the queen bee, uh, the queen bee trap, wanting to be liked, wanting to be popular, wanting to put others down to keep their place of power. And so it's very important as parents of girls that we get that out of them as quickly as possible and make sure we're monitoring them, watching them, how they are with others, and making sure they don't turn into that mean girl, because that mean girl becomes the girl who's sitting in front of the Senate committee lying about a guy for
yeah.
money. Because Christine Blasey Ford, by the way, got at least $1 million in GoFundMe. At least $1 million. So let me ask you something, Ben. If you are out, do you think, how many women do you think exist in America who would lie about a guy tugging on their bathing suit for $1 million?
About 75% of them, easily.
Easily. There's a huge number of women who would do that easily. Huge.
Mhm.
So the idea that, these women, and not only was she paid $1 million, but that Julie Swetnick, that lying liar with the forked tongue, who said he was in charge of rape gangs, and then suddenly she changed her story to say, well, he was handing out solo cups, and it was like basically the same thing. Um, she also got hundreds of thousands of dollars in GoFundMe fundraising, which I happen to believe is just funneling money to the Democrats. I think that's how they get, I think they get paid, their lawyers, that's how Gloria Allred probably gets paid. And they'll probably, I bet you Christine Blasey Ford will get a book deal out of it also. She already got an award from her alma mater. They gave this woman an award.
Ugh.
I know. For what? For what? And if one thing I can say, and I wrote about this too, it really bothered me that everybody, including the conservative press, called her credible, a credible witness. If you were watching the news coverage, you heard the word credible at least 300 times before lunch. Christine Blasey Ford gives a credible testimony. She's credible. She was very credible. Even the president of the United States said, I found her to be very credible. What?
Right.
I found her to be incredible. I found her to be insincere. I thought she had no tears in her eyes, although she kept on doing that fake sobbing. She also had this little high-pitched, little whiny girl voice that nobody would expect to come out of the mouth of someone who has a doctorate, a 60-year-old woman, talking like
she was certainly manufactured.
Oh, it was manufactured to the hilt. And that no one saw this except for body language experts. And, those people saw it, that the press just decided she was credible. It was too much for me to take, Ben. It was too much. I was like, get me to my computer. I have to do something about this. I have to say something. So I did. I wrote this article. It was called, How to Christine Blasey Ford Proof Your Son. And it went really viral. And it has a lot of the same sort of things I write about in the book. And Tucker Carlson called and wanted me to come on the show and talk about it. So that was super fun. It was like the best day ever. And it was really him that got it running in my head that, no, I need to write a book about this, because during our conversation, I said, don't trust women. Women lie. And he laughed hysterically. And he said, how can you say this? You're a woman. And I tried to explain it to him, all the things I've been telling you. And he says, I guess it's true that on a biological level, I want to believe women. As a man, I feel like I should believe them, like I want to believe them. And all I could think at that moment was, oh my God, you people, you men out there, you don't know what you're dealing with. And I need to help you because women can and they will destroy your life. Have you ever seen that show on the ID network called Snapped?
Nope.
Oh, it's a great show. I love crime shows. These are true murder mysteries, true murder shows. And it's basically like, but it's all women. Okay. So the show Snapped is all women offenders. These are all women who either murdered their husbands or loved ones or hired men to do it. And you could fill up, this thing has like 10 seasons. So the idea that women are some kind of saintly, vaunted creatures, who would never do anything, just turn on the ID network and watch Snapped a couple times and you will change your mind. But of course, do you think, Ben, that anybody really believes the feminists with their believe women? Anyone who's had experience in the real world with real women, do men really buy this believe women stuff?
I mean, no. If a man's got his head screwed on right and understands human nature at all, it's going to be one of those things where it's like, well, let's see the court trial then.
Yeah, like, has any man, have these people never been through divorce? I've never heard so many terrible stories of women lying to get their way and get custody of children and during divorce proceedings. Not that men don't do that sometimes too. They do. All human beings have the capability of being evil, of doing evil things, of making bad choices. And so to elevate women somehow above humanity is stupid. It's stupidity squared. And I'm just not having it.
Mm-hmm. And for myself, it's like I can't stand when people lie. I do my best not to lie and all this other stuff. To see it, it's like eventually these people are going to get a rude awakening. Either no one will believe them even when it happens, or it'll be one of those things where it's an occasion for violence or just like throwing them out. It's like, nope, too bad, we've heard this story before, Sally sob story, you know. We're not falling for it. But
Hmm.
but evidence. Oh, evidence matters now. How interesting.
Yeah, it does matter. It really does matter. It
Yep.
matters that we stop doing this thing that we're doing, allowing the mob, the outrage mob, to destroy people's lives, to go.
Yep.
I mean, look what they did to the Covington kids. The Covington kids made it into the book, and here's why. Because I noticed that most of the people who were dragging them on Twitter and in social media were female members of the press,
Yep.
women. They were women. And you know what? Do you know what made that particularly bad? They are women who people look up to as, to see when women civilize the world. Okay. So, like, men only go as far as women let them go in a lot of ways. Women raise men. So we train them how to be. We train our little boys how to behave in public, right? Women are a civilizing force for the most part, where
Yep.
we're supposed to be. Okay, now what we've become, but we're supposed to be a civilizing force on men, and that starts at home with our children. And what was the psychological thing that happened when these women were dragging these children on Twitter was that it made it okay for everyone to do so, to follow their lead, because they were mothers, they were women. And here they said it was okay to drag minor children, right?
Mm.
Do you see what I'm saying? And to me, that was a horrific development. Like, how can these women do this to these kids? How do they just ignore the fact that they're minors, first of all, and so they have more rights than most people. When you're in the press, you can't report on minors the same way you report on adults. There are rules,
Yep.
which they just threw them all out the window, identifying them. These are things you should not be able to do, and you're not supposed to do it. In journalism school, we were taught is absolutely forbidden. You can't do it. You
And
cannot
there's
name these people. You can't name
yes.
minors in the press, and yet here were these women in the press. Maggie Haberman at the New York Times, and there were
CNN.
There were so many of them. There were so many of them, and they just opened the
Mhm.
floodgates. They were the ones who opened the floodgates and allowed what was done to those boys to be done to them, and that was just despicable.
Speaking of consequences, CNN's on the hook for $250 million,
Isn't that
which
the
is
greatest?
like, oh, clown
Isn't that
world
the
strikes
greatest?
again.
I
You
know,
know,
it's
it's
the greatest. I'm on
yeah.
cloud 9 about that. I gotta tell you, I can't wait to see, and I think they're gonna lose. I don't see how they could win. I don't. Unless they get some judge who's sympathetic, I don't see how they win that one, and I love it.
And and that'll be one of those things where like that'll I assume that the Covington boys lawyer is going to be top flight. Otherwise, it's not going to be a great trial because judges tend to swing left wing more than not. I certainly know. I always get a chuckle every time the Ninth District Court or whatever they're called of appeals tries to legislate from the bench what Trump can and can't
Yeah,
do.
the Ninth Circus, we call them, yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
yeah, there's always gonna be some judge to say, "This is unconstitutional. Well, you can't do it," especially where Trump's concerned, because they just can't stand him, so they'll always find some judge, but I'm hoping that in this particular case, the judge will just be a normal, law-abiding judge, and we'll see that their rights were completely violated. They were defamed. They were defamed and libeled in print,
hmm hmm
and they did not retract until they were sued. That's another thing that's really going to come back to get them.
Really?
Oh yeah, because some of them, like some of the people on Twitter, when the lawyer got involved and the lawyer said, delete this, or pay, there's going to be hell to pay. Some did delete their tweets, some did not, and none of the newspapers did any of their retractions until after the lawsuit was filed. And in those cases of defamation, that will not help them. Uh, Retracting after you've been sued does not show goodwill.
Yeah.
So they will not get extra points by any judge of worth his salt for doing that. So I just can't wait. It's just gonna, it's the best thing to happen all year. It's these huge lawsuits against CNN. It's the best thing ever.
All this stuff that sort of comes out is like the term I use in my circles uses clown world. Just sort of sitting there watching the circus, watching the clowns play
Yeah.
around. You have no idea what to do. Let's be real. I'm as much of a guy as anything. I do want the girlfriend, the wife, the whatever. I still will go out to quest and to find and to do better. But at the same time, it's like, is this a Medusa in disguise?
Yeah.
Is this that? And it's seeing all these things happen in the world. It's you just gotta sit back and enjoy it, and just wait for something that you can do to pop up. And you should be doing things at this point. We've had 5 years where people have been talking about the problems, and now we see the problems,
Yeah.
and it gets worse every year. Like in 2014, when I was in college, the question was, hey guys, we're not getting as laid as often and people aren't getting married. How do we fix this? And now it's, are the Crusades a legitimate choice again? Yes or yes. Or it's
Yes or
things
yes.
like the Covington boys, where it's
James.
like lawfare is a legitimate conservative choice that we need to make. The liberals do it all the time. And I don't even want to say conservatives, because what have they conserved?
Nothing. They're so useless.
Yep. And it's like, as things go on, as things get crazier, there'll be more time for chuckles, more time to write books, which I need to do. I haven't written anything this week. I've written a short story last week. I am so behind on everything, except these live streams, which I consider all right.
Yeah, you gotta keep creating, gotta keep doing more, gotta keep doing different, gotta keep growing. You're not growing, you're dying. And so, what else can we do? All we can do is, and somebody said to me today, actually, because I had broken a story that was really disturbing about Amazon selling child sex dolls to pedophiles. I know you think that you've reached the bottom, and then they just keep digging. And I discovered these on Amazon through a tip on Facebook, and sure enough, it was real. They were selling little dolls that look like children, that are sex dolls for pedophiles. And somebody said to me, how do you do this? Like, how do you continue? How are you not super depressed all the time? And I'm not going to lie. I mean, it is really disturbing when you find stuff out like this, but what are my choices? My choices are say nothing or quit doing this, or scream as loudly as I can from the platform that I have to put out the warning cry. Like, pedophilia is coming next. Okay, that's the thing that the LGBTQ WTF train is doing next.
Oh, they've been doing it for a while. They make
right. They've been doing it
year.
for a while. But that's the thing that's going to hit us like a freight train, like the transgender agenda did 2 years ago. The transgender thing came right when Obama was leaving office, through I guess maybe right before that. So maybe it was 4 years ago, but with all this, transgenders in the bathroom and this and that. And now, and transgender everything everywhere. But I'm telling you that what's coming next is pedophilia, the acceptance of and legalization of pedophilia. That's what they're after. That's what they want. And I'm not saying all gay people want this. Okay, the LGBTQ WTF Gestapo is something different than gay people. Okay, most gay people just want to live their lives. They're not into any political activism and whatnot, and they just want to live their lives, and that's fine, and that's good. The political arm of that community, the political arm is so far to the left, and there is a real drive to remove all rules, all morality from sexuality entirely. And this thing that I found at Amazon, it's just like, you've got to be kidding me. It's not even illegal in this country to buy a sex doll that looks like a child. Did you know that?
Yes, I am aware of what the laws are, and quite a few things that would disturb you. But No, like to me, I actually don't. I don't agree with it. I think it's always much worse than it could be. And well, especially with people who define themselves explicitly on their sexual mores, that is to say, that they have an explicit type of sex that they enjoy. I think that it is more of them choosing to jump over the abyss than it is they're not capable of jumping over the abyss. There a lot of people are trying to say, I see that, pedophilia is a sexual orientation.
Right.
Uh, it's you know
Yeah, like that it isn't a disorder to be fixed, but it is an orientation to be celebrated. And the Huffington Post was having a guy write on their website calling himself the friendly pedophile, I think, and he claimed to be a non-offending pedophile, but he was trying to explain to people how he deserved to be part of society, and yes, he is attracted to 4-year-olds, but don't fear me. You know, it's like,
right.
no, I'm sorry, dude.
Oh, I'm
If you
not the one
get
who's supposed to
anywhere
be
near
afraid.
my kid, I'm gonna hit you with a baseball bat. No, like just no. Uh, and
It's like
it's
he says he's non-offending, but I'd like to see his internet history.
Yeah, right,
Uh,
well, and so yeah, so, I mean, so anyway, we have 2 choices, and the choices are, do we stay silent or do we keep trying? We have to keep trying. I realize we're losing this culture war. It's not lost on me at all that, like, we are losing it, and it seems like there are just forces greater than us that are controlling it and taking it to places that nobody ever wants to go. And we won't know that until it's too late. Like there's only a few of us standing up saying, "You don't want to go here. Don't go here. It's really scary and bad." And when we get there, I'm sure a whole lot more people will be going, "Oh dear God, how did we get here?" While we've been saying for years, for
oh yeah,
decades, that this is where it was going, and now we can see it happening with the trans drag queens,
yes,
children children being dressed up like little boys, being dressed up like sexualized women and dancing in gay bars for money. It is Sodom. We are here. It's Sodom and Gomorrah. Like,
oh we'll
not
get
they're coming to the door soon to
there. Yeah.
demand our daughters. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's coming.
Oh no, they're demanding our travelers. We throw out the daughters, and they don't want them. Uh,
Right,
the
right. They're demanding the travelers, and then we give
yes.
them the daughters instead, and
Well, what'll happen
ugh,
is like Sodom. A lot of people like to point up Sodom for various things. The king of Sodom knew Melchizedek. Lot was still a moral person, even though he was extremely backslidden. And they explicitly say when they're criticizing him that he tried to judge them and tried to reform them, and that they hated him for it. They said he sat at the gates, which is basically saying he made himself a judge. Um, in their culture, blah blah blah. Uh, we have the better knowledge. We have ultimately a moral core of people. But it's like with me trying to do like video reviews and create content for other people's works in our sphere, especially superversive works. Trying to put gas into the tank for like fandoms and stuff. We have to be willing to put in the work. We have to be willing to make the hard calls and the hard choices. It's not hard for me to say, I am fighting the culture war against feminism because I don't have a date tonight. That's not true. That's not fighting. That's me not willing to get a dating site,
right,
or whatever. But rather creation, holding to your standards, holding to your morality, and not giving in, because you only have to try like meth once to be addicted to it. It's you can make one mistake. Like I have a friend who was addicted to heroin, and somebody spiked his heroin with fentanyl, and he
oh
died from it.
God,
It's actually coming up. It's actually had the year anniversary of it a while ago, a couple days ago. But
sad.
yeah, but it's like it only had to happen once, and it's just all over. And we can't have a perfect run of this life, but we can still do our best to head off the powers of the past, to not make ourselves an easy target, to when they fight back. I recommend your book for learning how to do learning how to defend yourself and all that jazz. There's also SJWs Always Lie and SJWs Always Double Down by Vox Day. And there's a
Great book.
whole, oh yeah, oh yeah. There's a whole host of literature out there nowadays and blogs going back a decade or more that I have personally read on Return of Kings, on various other sites that tell us how you should behave, how you should act, and how you can defend yourself by it. And some of the first steps is not giving in and lawyering up. And you just got to be willing to fight it. Like if
Well,
somebody's
never apologize. Never
yeah,
apologize. I mean,
absolutely,
I'm just not going to apologize for holding the same beliefs that my religion has held for 2,000 years. I'm not going to apologize for that. I can love people and still agree with my faith. And one of the the cover of this is Salome and John the Baptist on with his head. She's got his head on the platter.
mm-hmm.
In that particular story, I don't know if many people are familiar with the story of Salome, but she's kind of a non-character in the story. The story is really about Herodias, the queen, her mother, and Herod. And Herod had taken her mother from his brother, so they were in an incestuous relationship. And which was a very pagan thing to do. They were all into all sorts of sexual deviancy. And John the Baptist refused to stop telling them to stop it. And that was why he was killed, because he was bold and because he told them that their sexual sin was a problem. Herodias didn't want to hear it. And she had her daughter dance for Herod because she knew Herod would give her a prize. And she knew that Herod wouldn't kill John the Baptist because he was terrified of him. And so she used her daughter to do it for her. And sure enough, it worked. And even Herod didn't want to do it. It even says that he was scared to do it, but he had to because he had given his word. So, it just goes to show that this has been going on for a very long time. People have never wanted to be confronted about their sexuality and their sexual sins. And that includes heterosexual people too. Okay. No one wants to be confronted about living in sin and committing adultery, and all of these things are the same. They are the same. And so I'm just simply not going to apologize for 2,000 years of teaching that, I may fail myself. I have failed on several occasions to live up to the teachings of my faith. And so has everybody else. But that doesn't stop the fact that we need to continue to tell people the truth. We need to continue to be, to hold up the truth as a standard and as the truth, because it is. And there's nothing else. It's not in hatred. There's no hatred there. There is only love. Because I love the truth. And I quote Milo in this book, Milo Yiannopoulos, extensively about in his interview with Father Martin, who's a Jesuit priest, and they interviewed him for American Magazine. And he said, why would I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I love the truth. I don't love a lie. I don't want you to lie to me to make me feel better about myself. Truer words have never been spoken. I mean, if you can be an honest human being, you don't want people to lie to you just to make you feel better.
Yep. That's absolutely true. I would hate to believe that people were lying to me about my writing or the things that I'm doing, and I've made some terrible mistakes. I've done some things I'm ashamed of, but those things are under the blood. I can always rise up and try again and do something better and later, and do better the next time.
Yes.
But it's you still have to be self-aware. You still have to be willing to look yourself in the eye and say, yes, I'm going to do this hard thing. Because otherwise you're just never going to do it.
It's true.
Well, we've been talking for about an hour. Do you have any last words for us?
Well, you can go on to Amazon.com and you can get my book, Believe Evidence, The Death of Due Process from Salome to #MeToo. It's on sale on Kindle for $2.99 only. It's quite a steal. And the paperback is only $12.99. So please go get it, because it's in the, you'll laugh at this, but it's in the category feminist theory. And it opened as a #1 new release in feminist theory. I was like, in the same category with like Virginia Woolf, and whose book, by the way, is called Vagina. Or not Virginia Woolf, Naomi Wolf. Sorry, excuse me, Naomi Wolf. And so that's a lot of fun. So if you want to piss off the feminists, just go click on buy the Kindle a bunch of times, and it'll rise up in the feminist theory category, making them crazy.
Row, fight the power, fight the power.
Fight the power.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Megan. And I hope that your book at least helps one person out there who might need it. And I absolutely agree with you with all the things you said. Never apologize. Never give in to them. Lawyer up. Do this. Do that. Know what you're doing, and know what your morality is and how it can protect you. Which is, of course, you could do a whole video series about that. But
Yeah.
we've been talking a while. Do check out my Fiverr and all the other links I put down below. I'd be more than willing to help anyone out there for money. But also, I do this for free because I enjoy it so much. Thank you again, Megan, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Bye.